Ire were were nita ocho. Ire were were.
Hello and welcome to Conversations with Mother Earth, brought to you by Grounded Press. My name is Dana Petrovic, and each week my guests and I explore one aspect of Mother Earth and the gifts that she gives us. We also discuss why these gifts are so precious and why we should value them. We got you curious? Good. We love curiosity. What do terms like Sirocco, Aeolian, Gale, Zephyr, Squall, or Haboob have in common? They are all our names of winds in different regions with different regional strengths and sources. And of course, there are many, many more, as every region named winds their own way. In my country, the powerful northeast wind, Bura, is the one that sailors fear the most. And in my book, Vana's Adventure with Mother Earth, Vana and Mother Earth talk to Khamsin, the wind that is known in Sub-Saharan Africa. Why are winds important? You will see in this episode that winds regulate weather patterns, offer a fresh breeze on a summer day, or even pollinate. They are powerful change makers that we sometimes fear and resist, but that we cannot live without. My guest today is Renee Baribeau, who calls herself a wind whistler and who researched winds for her insightful book, Winds of Spirit, Ancient Wisdom, Tools for Navigating Relationships, Health, and the Divine. That is why I invited Renee to be my speaker about wind. Renee is also a practical shaman and a go-to soul coach. She's from the United States and calls the West Coast her home. Renee, welcome to Conversations with Mother Earth.
Well, I am so happy to be here, and you're such a delight. It's like I already feel like a new friend.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Tell us, my listeners and me, what prompted you to write this beautiful book, Winds of Spirit?
It was the wind that prompted me. I truly thought I was writing a book. Well, I thought I was writing one of those weekend handbooks, you know, the kind they say you can write a book in a weekend, for my coaching clients about how to navigate your life, I thought the wind was a metaphor. And I thought, well, this would be really good. I could use sailing terms. And what I didn't know was the wind was having their way with me. And you talk about, the Haboob, that like one grain of sand was bouncing off the next grain of sand until there was like this torrential force of wind driving me for 6 years, 5 or 6 years, however long it took to write that book, and 6 to 7 years ever since, to keep getting the information from the wind and taking it deeper and deeper and deeper. And it all came about because I wrote this book called The Shaman Chef: How Cooking Saved My Life. And it was a poorly written memoir about how the act of cooking brought me present, but it really was practice, I believe, for writing a really solid, good book, which this book is 14 edits later. And I realized through the process that what the shaman told me in Chile, I don't know, 20 years ago, she said, you have a big name to grow into. She called me Tre Enko, and she said that it loosely meant the sound between passing things, but that I would learn over time what that meant. And now I understand it to mean that I was going to bring back the wind wisdom to the planet that had been missing for 12 to 14,000 years. It's hard to really know, but we were navigating without the wind.
Yeah, I mean, the wind was there, but as you said, we lost our navigation skills, and any sailor knows when we don't adjust the sails, we'll talk about that a bit later, then that doesn't work so well. We don't get forward, really.
That's true. And also what most people don't realize is that Ruach, Nirvana, Holy Spirit, they were all borrowed from the wind. They're wind terms. They all mean wind. Om is the sound of wind. It's the breath of the wind of creation. And so we really we lip serviced it, but we never really became in relationship with it in order to have it really be a guiding principle in our life, now that most people left the religion behind for their spirituality.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because with every breath we are connected with the world outside.
Mm-hmm.
We are the world. There is no separation with anybody or anything out of that. We covered that in the session about breath. How does it, when we look at kind of the practical wind around us, the weather patterns and all that, what is the role of the wind in the larger picture? How does the wind influence our lives and support, of course, the tireless work of Mother Earth?
Well, the truth is if there's no wind, we die. It's just a simple fact that at the time of whether it was the Big Bang or whatever creation story you choose to give life to, wind was there. That was what was happening when I was doing the research for the book. I kept thinking, like, I thought first it was a metaphor, but then I was like, well, that's interesting. Well, that's interesting, because I'd follow the metaphors back, and I was like, these aren't metaphors. These are actual, wind. We breathe in the first breath of wind when we come out of the womb. It's a wind breath. And when we die, we exhale out that breath, which is another wind breath. And the earth does the same thing. That bang of creation required a wind to make it move. And when you think of a force that's as powerful enough to create all of this earth and all of this atmosphere, and if you think about it, the same wind that was on the planet 4.5 billion years ago when this earth was created, it's a closed system. So the wind is here to refresh itself and to renew itself, and has a complete ability to rebirth itself over and over and over again.
Yes.
And I used to go, when people say we're all connected, because I thought, like, well, that's just lip service. But then once I met the wind, I understood that we are connected, because when I breathe out today, when I breathe out this love and say, God, you're awesome, it's coming all the way around to where you are, 12 hours in a different time zone. You're going to get my loving wind breath in a couple of short days. And we've just seen how this works with the COVID experience.
Yeah.
That, Don Manuel up in Peru said that. He goes, there's going to be something, he's called it in his Quechua, that it would come on the wind. And at the time, I'm there like, well, what's going to come on the wind? Because these things always make more sense in hindsight. And I'm there, he was seeing this virus that was going to really shut down the world on a global level coming as a product of the wind.
As a storm.
As a storm. Absolutely. And so when these things happen, I'm there like, we're not separate. There is no me, there is no you, we're all breathing the same wind. And that's just is the basic human tenet that we need to understand, is that the wind I breathe in is the wind you're going to breathe. When I breathe it out is the wind you're going to breathe in tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Everything is connected, and the wind is the one who moves that from one place to the other. We'll talk about more why that is important. in a moment. But before that, just for my listeners, explain to them maybe briefly, what exactly does a wind whistler and a practical shaman do?
Well, the practical shaman is my business head, okay? Because truthfully, when I coined the word the practical shaman and bought the website, I was just an early adopter of the internet. I probably didn't even fully understand there that all shamanism was practical. I had the name before I really understood, what my role as a shaman or shamanic practitioner, or however you feel comfortable to hear that is. But all shamans were practical. They were concerned about the village, the health of the village, that the village was going to eat, that the livestock were fed, and that if somebody was hurt, that they could perform a healing. And the way that they do that is that they travel to non-ordinary reality. But the way I view that all these realities are going on at any given time, and you could tap into an alternate one where that holds the potential of a healed self, whether that's the healed self for the personal, the village, the world. And so it's the role of the shaman in the community to keep the community in balance. And so everything about it is practical.
Yes. And to be
Now,
also an early warning, isn't it? The shamans are also trying to be an early warning, to protect, to get signals earlier than the rest of the village in case there is harm coming their way.
Yeah, so they're also they can also, and this is, as you get clearer and you become less self-centered and more world service oriented, you start to get messages. Like the year before COVID hit, I called up my producer in Hollywood and said, I've got the best movie for you. I said, I think it takes place 40 years in the future. I said, there's a time people can't go out of their houses and they're, locked inside their houses. And I mean, I had this whole download. The thing was that's not where I put my attention because I'm very practical. And so basically what I think was that I got the early warning that we were going into a lockdown. I just put it way further out into the future. And I also saw the healing part of it, but then she told me that, Hollywood wasn't going to be interested in my movie for at least a good 6 or 7 years until we are on the other side of this whole thing. So it was an animated thing, and it's really kind of brilliant about how the wind helps heal this planetary issue we're having right now with the viruses and, our smaller world connection.
Yeah, no, definitely. I have a short story. I wrote it in German, something like 10 years ago, about a young, imagine her, what it would be looking into the future, a daughter of mine at a certain age, and how the world would look like. And it's also a locked world where it cannot go out because everything around is polluted and not really a safe environment to live the home. So back then I
Right?
think that will happen, but you see, it did happen.
It did happen, and it's how we respond to that, whether or not. And I think it's really important to get to know your neighbors. I think that we were traveling to everybody else's sacred sites, like we had some right and responsibility to go visit them all. And even because I want to go to Hale's cave, and I really want to go to Germany, and I want to go to Global Techie in Turkey, and I want to go to these places, and yet I see that the damage that we've done by just using up the resources in a way that wasn't too responsible. And so I've been stuck. How do you do a pilgrimage? And now the pilgrimage is down the road to the beach and, in my own yard.
Yeah.
It's a tricky situation we're in.
Yeah, it is, but forces us to be a little bit grounded, to be to be more kind of appreciate where we are and see the world close to home, as you said, see the neighbors, meet the neighbors, to understand how we rely on each other, discover the community, sense of community, see who friends are and how we reach to each other and support each other and connect with each other. I think if we adjust the sails again, we can learn a powerful lesson. It is very painful, of course, for those who lost a loved one, without any doubt. But we also don't want to waste these lives. We have to take the lesson out of it for the future. I think then all the effort was not in vain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially for our children who are having a much different experience than we had.
Yes.
With socialization and learning and education, and for the parents who have become not only working but educators, and we really realize this, that it takes a village.
Yeah.
And we've made our villages so small that you take the teacher out of the village, and as as a teacher you understand that, and all of a sudden the responsibility comes back to people who are unprepared to hold that space.
Yes, exactly. So I think it revealed us several powerful lessons for us humans, and I think if we take the lesson, we will be fine going forward.
I agree.
Yeah. In the second conversation with Mother Earth, Conversations with Mother Earth episode, Yajida and I talk about storytelling, and that the storytelling is as old as the humanity itself. Renee, in your book, you say wind existed first. What do you mean by that?
Because if in most of the creation stories, there's like they're all waiting for some kind of movement.
Oh.
And so there is no creation until the wind comes in and makes it move. Like, so in the Japanese creation story, the wind comes in and moves the fog so that they can look down and see what's in the swirling pot. So whether it's the chaos or the emerging, but in the emerging themes, like some of the native traditions in the United States, the wind comes, and like wind can do better, it dries up the floods, so that when the wind comes, dries up the floods, people can emerge back again from the earth. So if you look at every single creation story, the wind is there, and without it, there is no movement.
Yeah.
And we cannot live without the movement.
Yeah, you talk about that quite a bit. If we don't move, we stagnate, and we know what happens to a lake or to any piece of any pool or anything that stagnates.
Turns green, the scum, there's the fish die, there's no oxygen, and so it's an integral part of what's going on, and you're seeing that in the stronger storms and things like that. That there's a movement, like a force, trying to get our attentions, if nothing else, that we're out of balance.
Yeah, that's true, and it's fascinating in Croatia when Bura hits. Sometimes Bura can go on for 5 days, and it's a really fearful wind. What's fascinating is the silence that occurs. We literally feel the silence after the wind died down, and the light is so incredible.
Mm-hmm.
It's a completely different light. The sunset after 5 days of Bura is an indescribable experience. It's completely different than all the other days.
I understand that from many years ago. I did an artist retreat up in northern Vermont when the traveling monks were coming through, making their temporary mandalas, and then they did their whistling and their throating and all of that, and that night I went outside, and the energy that had shifted, and so this sounds like what you're talking about. It was like there was a clarity and a clearness to the evening that I hadn't experienced, and it was palatable.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no denying it. And we do practices in the wind clan where we do wind clearings with ourselves, where we go out and take a wind wash and wind walks and things like that, that actually can mimic that on a more daily level, so that you don't need the borers to come through your life and uproot everything. Or sometimes you do, but sometimes you do. You know, there's also the doldrums where there no wind blows, and
Yeah.
those times are pretty revealing as well. You know,
Yeah.
finding out what's essential, what you can live without. So I think that if, as with in without, and again, that's one of those other catch 20 in those phrases that we say like we know what it means, but if you really think about it, is that the wind is a holographic representation and experience of yourself.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
But this is a little bit linked with my next question, because you say in your book, great ideas are born of the wind and have always been available to those whose inner eyes and ears are open. So how can we allow the wind to inside us?
One thing that one of the easiest ways is to realize that if wind was, it takes like a little logic. So if wind was there at the beginning, and wind is what stirs the imagination and the creativity of a planet, of a universal system being born, imagine what you could do to it if you started to give it a little bit of attention in your life. So when you breathe in, imagine breathing in that wisdom of the ages, and let that wisdom filter through your entire being. And then as you breathe out, imagine that you can release that back to the universe, and it's going to clear itself. Because like you were saying about that Bura wind, is that after it blows for 5 days, everything is clear. So to just start to put your faith and trust in the wind, that it's going to do for you what you can't will and muster up in your own life, and it works.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's the way that you be really becoming truly in relationship with the earth is when you understand that you are the wind too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's interesting. And yes, this all sounds very logical and all makes a lot of sense. However, we do resist that. We do resist to adjust the sails to this wisdom. What are the common reasons people do when you talk to your clients? What are the common reasons we resist winds and change? And yeah,
A lot of times with my clients, I find that they're not ready, and we have this idea that we should always be ready to do the next. And really, when you start living a more cyclical, natural life, you start to think, like, for example, somebody close to me, she's a mother and her children are going off to college this year. That's the end of a cycle, a big cycle.
yes. Yeah.
And instead of being present to, wow, that's taking a big chunk out of my heart, and my whole family's being disrupted, which happens at the end of any cycle, like the bigger cycle we're in, you know, as the Holocene comes to an end, where this is just the natural part of nature. But we're taught, what's the next thing? What can I buy to fix this?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of like, oh my God, everything about my life is dissolving now, and it's going to go into decay before it's going to, you know, take up. And then it takes a few years. Like a friend of mine who was in that cycle, like, oh, well, you're really not ready to start something new. Your children are going off to college. 3 years later, she's finally found something that's feeding her soul a little bit, because then you have to rest for a season. And then you have to come out and say, okay, well, what's now?
We have to welcome the winter into our lives.
We absolutely have to befriend the winter. And so many of the stories, so many of the mythologies talk about welcoming and making, and especially the south wind and the north wind, the young wind of the south and the ancient wind of the north, they're always in contention for our spirit and our emotions. Are we in harmony? And how do we melt that cold ice that's our, that's our mind with our genuine hearts? It's a that say what they say, the longest distance is between your head and your heart. Well, it's really between the south wind and the north wind.
No, that's interesting that you say, because I always say I traveled the world, but the hardest journey was to get scientists to get out of my head into my heart.
Well, if you think about it this way, now from now on, you'll think about it. Wow, here's my north wind and here's my south wind. They're not in alignment with each other again. So, what do you have to do to melt that cold north wind? That ego mind, which is so important. We like, oh, I don't want to have an ego. Oh, yes, you do.
We all do.
Yes, you do. You do, because otherwise you wouldn't be here. You'd be
Yes.
you'd be flithering off into the wind somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, but it's interesting. But the inner winds can be very violent. You talk about that too, and anxiety. All sorts of inner winds are also there. How do we deal with these storms?
And this might be my age, but with patience. I think self-acceptance is really the answer to almost everything. Is that, like, one time I was standing in front of the group of addicts in the treatment center, and I was doing a lecture, and I was telling them that there's one thing, like, to say, okay, I accept myself, because it's only when I accept this self could I say, all right, well, I accept this self. But the year my book came out, I was really exhausted that year, because I really pushed and pushed and pushed I'm a pusher anyway, but that year I was exceptionally tired, and I had to accept where I had gotten myself to, and be with that and rest in that, like you would rest the loaf of bread, baking, to then to see, like, okay, what changes can I make from this place of self-acceptance, not from the place, anything you beat is gonna resist you. But the good thing about resistance in the wind is, if you think about it, a kite flies higher with resistance. An airplane takes off with the resistance. So the resistance is actually one of the most positive forces in your life, if you understand that it's there to teach you where you might need to, lower the wing flaps a little bit so you can take off a little higher, or so that you can learn to adjust the sail, because maybe you're trying to go directly across the lake, when if you tack,
Yeah.
you're going to get there a whole lot faster, and you're going to have a lot more energy when you get there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And enjoy the journey along the.
If you're lucky, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that is so true. Here, this might be a silly question, but when we look at the winds, do you have for the lack of better word, a favorite wind, if I can call that way, or if it is one, which one is it?
Well, it's kind of funny, because so in the book there's the four cardinal winds, and then there in the back there's 32 cross-cultural winds. And now you just told me of another wind today, which is actually the north wind, I believe, the Bura.
It's
a northeast wind.
Northeast,
Okay.
yes.
So there's all those different subtle winds, but in here there's 29 wind gods and goddesses. Some are, Mari, she might be the precursor to the Divine Mother, because she transformed, and the wind was here before Christianity. So, Mari, the Basque wind, they say could have been how that idea was born. And so she's like a gift. She's like a loving, gentle, nurturing kind of experience. But this month I got Enlil. And Enlil, if for the history buffs, Mesopotamia, and when the humans got annoying, well, first they say that the gods created the humans just for amusement, But then when they got annoying and made too much noise and were having too much fun, Enlil brought in the floods and, got rid of everyone. So this month we call in a wind every month we have a 10-month apprenticeship program, and we made wind prayer flags and have one a month. And I had like Enlil, which I've never pulled out of the wind sack ever. And it's been a lot of karmic lessons for me about, I'm used to saying whatever comes out of my mouth, and it's gotten me in a lot of trouble recently where I've learned the bigger the audience, the more that I have to really reform my words. And so they're all energetic experiences for you to get to know. It's a wonderful book. I mean, I read it now and I'm there like, who wrote that? Like, where'd that come from?
That's funny you say that, because I feel about my books too. Sometimes I let them sit for a while and then read again and say, have I written that?
I know. Who was so clever? I don't know. It was like, and I think books have that my book editor will tell you that books have a life of their own.
They
and
do.
We're really here to shepherd them into being.
Yeah.
Any good book. I mean, there's lots of books out there that are probably full with words, but I believe that that's an experience too. But I agree with you on that. Who wrote that book?
It's fascinating that you mentioned the Holy Mother, that you mentioned the being connected with the Holy Mother, because we got the approval for the theme song of this podcast from the theme song is Ide Vere Vere, which is a celebration of Ochun, the original mother. And Deva Premnal does the singing, and she has an angel voice. It's so you at the beginning of each episode, the song, and at the end we play out each episode with this song. So I feel very proud that we got.
Yeah, no, she does. The first time I ever heard her sing in person was we were up in a gymnasium up in New York City, up in Harlem. And it was like maybe an audience of 40 or maybe, I don't know, under 100 people. And I'm thinking this from God's lips to her mouth, or, I mean, she had that, there was just something so pure about her voice.
Exactly. There is no filter in between, as you said. That is a direct download.
That's how it was, yeah. And I've seen it other times where it hasn't been quite such a direct download, but in that moment it was unfiltered, unbeautiful, and I'd never experienced that God self of the voice before like that. I've experienced that with cooking when I was a chef, that it brought me present, but I never, because I can't sing like that,
Me neither.
So
Me neither.
If
you want to clear the room,
yeah.
I only sing if you want to clear the room of people.
Right, exactly. We have some wind songs that people have created, and I'm there like, okay, you sing that first.
Renee, I could go on forever with you, but I think my audience, my listeners, are also now keen to know where they can meet you and learn more about you. So tell us, where can we look up you? You have a Facebook, Instagram profiles, LinkedIn. Where can we find you?
All of those places. I think you found me on LinkedIn, which is,
yes,
I'm the only one. I'm an executive in the behavioral health field, and I never bothered to change my description about myself. It says, yeah, where do you work? But at behavioral health field, but I'm a shaman. And but so I'm on LinkedIn. I have a wind clan on Facebook. I do the Shaman's Cave every week with Sandra Ingerman, which is like truly a blessed honor to sit there with somebody who's been out in the world teaching for 40 years, whereas I was learning whatever. So we do that every week at the shamanstv.com. So you can find me at thepracticalshaman.com or shamanstv.com or on Facebook or LinkedIn. You'll find me. I'm a good first page Google search.
Good. Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for today's conversation, Renee.
Thank you. What a delight.
Thank you so much. This concludes today's conversation with Mother Earth, brought to you by Grounded Press. The next episode is going to be very peaceful, as I will truly be going home. Stay tuned.